I also think that parents also have to make sure that they are examples of proper behavior on social media. So, parents have to make sure that they are not having derogatory comments and things of that nature. Children mimic what they see adults do. So, so I think that's as equally as important as the monitoring of the children is making sure that they're providing good examples.
You're listening to the smartsocial.com podcast. I'm your host, Josh Oakes. This is our District Talk segment where we interview district leaders to learn how they're keeping students safe on social media so those students can someday shine online. Now, let's get back to the interview.
Hi, Josh. Good morning. My name is Luis Valentino, and I am the superintendent of the Coachella Valley Unified School District, and we're located in the Coachella Valley, 2 hours east of Los Angeles. We have approximately 17,000 students in an area covering 1,200 square miles.
Hello, my name is Dr. Lamar Goree. I serve as superintendent of Caddo Parish Public Schools. The primary hub of Caddo Parish Public Schools is Shreveport, Louisiana. We're a system of about 35,000 students, serving them in 55 schools.
Hi, I'm William Wright, superintendent of Sumter School District in South Carolina. We are in the southeastern part of the United States. Sumter School District is pretty much in the center of the state of South Carolina, and we have 27 schools that serve close to 15,000 students.
How have you been successful in increasing parent engagement to help keep students safe on social media?
We communicate at the beginning of the year as devices get distributed. There is not only the signature of the student who uses the technology, but the parent. And what that means, the parent has had to read it. They have to read the user policy so that they understand what the expectations are on how it's going to be used both at school and at home. The role that the parent plays at home with the use of the technology. We still have a number of students who are doing virtual learning because they haven't returned since the pandemic. And so they're the more experienced ones and the ones that can handle the issues or the questions around the technology. So we have had conversations with some of them to better understand what the problems have been, and then we use that information as we update our use policies.
I think one of the key components of that, man, I hate to say that discipline situations has driven us to really pay close attention to this, but that would be the facts, because I do think a lot of the initial parental engagement when it came around technology was around things like cyberbullying. And I do think that there was a lot of time and attention put there. But what I've done with that is I really kind of changed that narrative around. So if we're going to say that textbooks are now going to be electronically, passed out to students, how are we going to make sure that parents are aware of those? So how are we going to make sure that we're providing parents with that support and with that information around supporting that? And that's something that I've really challenged my team as well as my campus teams with helping to implement that. And the advantage we have is that while we as schools have moved to technology, parents alike have also moved to technology. So it's something that we have seen very good opportunities for parents to adapt and to really support what we're doing with technology in the schools. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that there were roadblocks in the beginning. There were parents that really wanted that hard textbook that they were traditionally used to learning from. And really how we supported them was important as we went through that transition and how, as we continue to go through that transition. It's an whole concept around if it was good enough for us, it's good enough for them. I do believe one of the, and I tell people that you have to find something positive in any crisis. And if there was one thing that came from the pandemic was that we all learned that we had to develop some level of adaptivity. And I do think technology and how we've embraced technology and how education is on technology as one of the key components to what we'll do in the future was certainly enriched as a result of a global pandemic.
It continues to be an issue of education and making sure that parents understand what we need from them in terms of support, in terms of monitoring what children are exposed to, and alerting us, to be honest with you, when their children are bullied or when their children are participating in bullying or social media bullying as it stands. But I also think that parents also have to make sure that they are examples of proper behavior on social media. So parents have to make sure that they are not having derogatory comments and things of that nature because children mimic what they see adults do. So I think that's equally as important as the monitoring of the children is making sure that they're providing good examples. Even me as a 56-year-old male, I have to be careful about how I respond to certain social media images, even on my private page, because I know that I am a public official. So sometimes we have to look at that for parents.
Are there any stories that come to mind about any social media incidents you have been able to get in front of or avoid by being proactive?
That, like many districts, we've had the issue of bullying. And so one of the things that we have done is we've tracked to get in front of, we have tracked the use of social media um to actually track the particular students who have been known to use the technology inappropriately. And so we actually have documented some of that. We also have Sprigio that allows students to report on other students who are using the technology inappropriately. So we are able to immediately respond to concerns. So at schools, students know as part of our annual assemblies about bullying and the use of social media for that and the other inappropriate uses of the technology. And so we are very fortunate that we have students who report to us issues of inappropriate, and a lot of those reports are anonymous. So it gives them the opportunity to feel safe in reporting out to us what they have learned about the inappropriate use of social media and other technologies.
When I think about some of the challenges that we have with social media, I think that the utilization of social media and how teachers are utilizing social media socially can be challenging. And I think that it's such an open book into a teacher's living room and into their lives, and how we're supporting teachers and ensuring that they're making decisions that don't compromise their level of professionalism or compromise their reputation is really important. And we as a school system have certainly tried to be in front of that, because we certainly do want teachers to be respected, but at the same time, we want teachers to know and feel free to live their whole life. We've tried to get in front of that with policy that tried to do just both things, to protect teachers, but also encourage them to live full lives too. So that's the one thing that comes to mind as a way we have tried to be forward thinking with technology. I do think too how we've looked at some of our acceptable usage policies and how we've looked at things like, teachers encouraging the use of technology and effective cell phone policies and things of that nature in our schools, and how we try to make sure that it's not a powered down situation in our schools, but really encourage teachers and provided those professional supports so that teachers felt equipped to manage technology in the classroom has been really important as well.
Well, I can think of one in particular where a child in a district was considering or at least issuing information in which he was going to do harm to the school. He was going to blow up the school was pretty much what he said. And because we got the information, got a tip through the service I mentioned earlier, because it tracks those too. It actually came into the city police department here. And so, of course, I would contact it immediately. Here's what we're doing. We're going to the home. They ended up intervening and determining whether or not the student had access to weapons in the house and all of the conversations they needed to have with the parents and so forth and so on. And uh, I at least think at the least that we prevented the threat of harm to someone and the disturbance that it would cause, whether the event actually occurred or not. And it was because of the software that we have in place. And then, of course, the proactiveness and the collaboration between us and the city police department.
What would your advice be to educators and administrators to work together to create a culture of digital safety and responsibility in their schools?
Digital safety should not be isolated as an entity in and of itself. It is part of the whole culture and climate of a school district, culture and climate of a school. We can't separate the two because it really is hand in hand, the way that we treat each other, the way that we feel about the use of the technology for positive uses instead of negative uses. And so we've been working really hard to create cultures and climates through continuous training of our faculty and staff, but also ongoing supports for our students. There's been a lot of trauma that has occurred since the pandemic, and a lot of them are still navigating that trauma. And so that trauma leads to difficult behaviors at times for students. So we provide a support system, say like a wellness center, which exists in our middle schools and high schools. They use that space to adjust some of that stress that may, in fact, allow them to return to the classroom or go back home without feeling the need to explode on social media and attack anyone. But that requires that we provide the supports for the adults who are working with our students.
My advice to any educator, and especially the system leader perspective, is that technology is certainly here to stay. And I encourage educational leaders and teachers alike to find ways to utilize it to enrich educational opportunities for children. The answer is not to turn the computer off. The answer is not to turn the cell phone off, but it's how do we find those great ways to where this can really be used as a tool, as an instrument, as a conduit to really increase educational opportunities for children.
I think first of all, it's got to be all hands on deck, to be honest with you. The problem that we continue to see in education and have for, this is about 26 years now, sometimes we do very good work, but we do it in isolation. What you're talking about now is not something that can be done in isolation. It has to be an all hands on deck. Um, the phrase that's been coined that I think is probably a pretty good one is when you see something, you have to say something. So social media, hoaxes, threats, conversation that goes maybe the way that it shouldn't, sexual innuendos, things of that nature. First of all, when we see it, we have to say something, and we can't be afraid to do that. There's got to be safe spaces for us to be able to do that as educators. And then when administrators learn of that information, we have to take everything in this day and time seriously. We can't assume that people said one thing but really meant another. So for us, we have to be proactive in the way that we do it. We got to continue to review policies because as we continue to explore new things, such as Chat GPT and what we're going to do with that, it requires us sometimes to go back and look at and implement new policies or update policies with the current trends of what we're dealing with.
What are your 1 to 2 biggest social media concerns for the future?
The fact that younger and younger students are using social media, and I don't think in many ways they're mature enough without some adult guidance, whether it's the parent or the teacher, to use the technology appropriately. We've seen examples of 5th and 6th graders now getting online, even though the platforms are supposed to limit who gets access to that under the age of 13 in some cases. Some platforms use a different age range. But that is a concern because students feel that they can say whatever without limited consequences because they're younger. And so that is one of the concerns that I have. The other one is how AI has been integrated into some of the messaging systems. And so what that does, it helps, while it can be a positive thing, it could also be very dangerous unless the AI platform limits, like Anthropic, right? One of the things that Anthropic does, it has the guardrails are higher than they are on chat. And so I don't know what they use in some of those, like WhatsApp or some of the other ones that are beginning. My son uses Bing, and so there is one AI attached to that. And so sometimes I wonder how they organize their thinking so that they can be either better at harassing or better at communicating positive messages. That's my concern, that unless there is some way of guiding students through the process of learning a new technology, right? And AI is just one more technology, but we've experienced with others. It's just that these technologies are becoming more sophisticated. So it requires that we are more sophisticated in our understanding.
As an educator, as a parent, as a human being, I too worry often about social media and a lot of things around the algorithms and a lot of things around how we only see certain things. And I often wonder that if social media does a good job of really creating that whole world view. We often hear the stories about when we were children, and certainly our parents, more so than us probably, as having only the evening news and it was presented based only on the news. Well, if you're getting your news from social media today, you're only getting news based on those things that you tread, that you like, or that you feed on. My hope and my fear is that, and my concern is that, are we really getting a whole view of what the world and what situations are? And that's probably my biggest concern with social media and how it impacts education. And how do we make sure that we are creating and feeding and equipping young people with whole views of the world and of situation.
Funding is tough. What advice would you give to other school districts to secure funding to create resources that parents need?
So one of the things that certainly that we have begun to do, and other superintendents probably across the country, is we need to start prioritizing, look at what we have and what we're using and how efficient we're being with our resources. We want to be good stewards of those resources. One of the things that the ESSER funds have done in support of return from the pandemic is to cause us to use one-time dollars in ways that can impact us in a negative way if we hire too much personnel, because then those monies are going to dry up by 2025. So we have to be mindful of how we've been using that money, but also then prioritize knowing that we're not going to have those resources after 2025, and we're going to just make sure that our core body of work is continuously supported. The issue of wellness is now greater than it was before the pandemic, and it's going to be a problem moving forward if we can't find the resources to do that. And so we really have to then be thoughtful about moving forward the next 2 school years, how we're going to start eliminating those expenses that are not going to help us after 2025.
I think one thing that is so important when you look at funding for technology is that you truly have to really rethink your funding model. I think when you look at the amount of dollars that we were spending on textbooks for many, 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 many years, you have to rethink that entire model. And you have to really look at how do you now create these new sources and revenue sources so that you can now fund technology. I think it'd be really smart too about the replenishing cycles and make sure that you build in those revenues to do that, because the thing about technology is that it ages out, and it even if it still works, sometimes just the modernization of technology changes, and you need to make those changes. So how we are replacing technology, how we're making those additional investments will be very important. I also would encourage systems to be very mindful of quality and make sure that you are investing in those things that will last and provide the best quality opportunities for children.
We have to educate people. Anytime you're talking about a new line item or increased funding or trying to get additional funding to support maybe something that you're already doing. This is my 11th year as a superintendent, and I tell people you have to continue to educate people on a daily basis. One of the biggest jobs that I have is I have people that work diligently to educate children in the classroom. My job is to educate the adults that we need things from, be they business people, be they county council members that we're trying to get additional funding or what have you. So the question you're asking really falls into that category, in that for me, any superintendent, it is important for us to continue to educate people on the whys of how we need and what we need and why we need it. And that is a never-ending battle, because people feel like public schools sometimes are not properly using funding. So we have to be very, very explicit about how and what we're using it for. And certainly with the challenges we're having with social media, which is your original question, we have to create and maintain line items for that work.
Thanks for listening to our smartsocial.com podcast. I'm your host, Josh Oakes. This was our District Talk segment where we interview school district leaders to learn how they're keeping students safe on social media so those students can someday launch into their future by shining online. This episode was brought to you by our smartsocial.com VIP program. It's called the Very Informed Parent Program, which helps you engage your students with teen-led video lessons. Stay one step ahead with our premium parent newsletter and discover hidden features on trending apps on teens' phones and our 54 plus live parent and student friendly events every single year. You can click on the link below to chat with one of our team members if you want a free pass to our VIP program to support your community with our smartsocial.com resources. And if you're a district leader who has a success story, we would love to feature you on a future episode. You can click the links below to reach out. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Have a great day.